Hello, welcome everyone. We have a quorum, so calling this meeting to order. Can we have approval of the minutes from the meeting from August 4th, 2014?
Move approval.
Second.
Any changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fantastic. So we have several people signed up for citizen comment. I believe the majority are around the Harley Clark. Sydney Evans, and you're speaking on any particular agenda item?
The Youth Job Center?
That's fine, got it. And Ms. Tar, and then Dare, Madeline? Oh, Decree, I'm sorry. And you're speaking on just open, great, thank you. Good hand signals, that's good. All right, so let's start. Sydney, you're up.
Hello?
Hi.
Lift that up.
And you have 3 minutes,
Okay.
and we are timing.
Oh, okay.
Actually, she's timing.
All right. Hi, my name is Sydney Evans. I live at 1934 McDaniel Avenue, and I'm speaking on behalf of Career Pathways. I just recently got an internship there for administrative assistant at the District 65, and I've been there for about 4 months. It's a great program. They've helped me through a lot with transportation. They've helped me with several other employment opportunities afterwards. They've got my foot in the door with numerous things. They're going to help with school, anything that I need help with, I just go through them, and they've been very, very, fast-paced with everything that they've helped me with. So,
Can you explain where Career Pathways, what organization Career Pathways is with?
they're with Youth Job Center, and they work with children ages 18 through 24 to help you find jobs around the community in Evanston.
Great. So, well, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's a hard job market, so.
Yes, it is.
To get a job and locally, that's fantastic. And you have a
Definitely.
new great superintendent, so congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Super. And you were well under your 3 minutes, so your first time at City Council?
Yes.
Well, you got a check plus. Lou Harms. Lou, you know the drill.
Yes, yes. You could share these with friends.
Yeah, we'll pass them down for you.
Yeah.
How about that?
Fantastic. We got it.
We got them.
You want one? Oh, there you go. Here, did you want this? This part of it?
If there's money, I don't think.
Well, not likely coming from me.
Hi, my name is Lou Harms. I live at 2115 Livingston Street in Evanston. I'm a fourth generation Evanstonian, and I went through this high school system and grade school system and IIT in Chicago to become an engineer. I was a soldier in World War II, so I've got a lot of experience. The topic is the negotiations for sale and lease of the 2603 Shared Road Harley Clark Mansion. I've been out of commission for 4 months, exactly 4 months. I actually died on the operating table 4 months ago in Honolulu, but they brought me back with a pacemaker and other things. But anyway, it's taken me 4 months to recuperate, and today I feel like $1 million.
Well, welcome
Fantastic.
back.
Welcome back,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't been related or associated with anything that was going on because I had other things on my mind.
More important is your health, yes.
Yes. Anyway, going back to last year, I remember the 400 concerned Evanston citizens who showed up and filled in. There were 2 or 3 auditoriums, and we were all opposed to the privatization of Harley Clark. Every one of us had a badge on, and I think we were very, very effective in directing us to the importance of retaining that property as for the city. The 400 people that showed up were from all parts of town, but primarily the 6th Ward. The points that were involved from the meeting was that there were 3 items. Number one, they were all of these 400 people were adamant. They were opposed to any privatization of the building. Number one. Number two, supported maintaining the building as a public asset for public use with public ownership forever. And number three, I would expect that they would oppose any future arrangements that would jeopardize public ownership and public use for future generations. That was my read on what happened with this group. And the whole 400 people, you could read body English. People were up in arms, ticked off. In conclusion, I want to just mention one thing. I'm an 88-year-old geezer that's been a retired mechanical engineer, and a good one, too. And my great-grandfather donated his land, now known as Harms Woods and Harms Road, to the Cook County for use and enjoyment of the public. How many of you have been out to Harms Woods during the spring and the fall? Wow, it's great, it's beautiful, and it's wonderful, okay? This property should have the same arrangement so that the future generations will be able to enjoy this priceless property forever. With that, I'll take any questions, but my whole point of being here is that I was not aware of what was going on for 4 months. And I was, especially when you have narcotics in you, you're in dreamland all the time. Well, I'm well now, okay? And the doctor saved my life.
Well, welcome back, and thank you for your comments.
Okay?
Barbara Janes, please.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Janes. I live at 802 Colfax Street. And I am here speaking on behalf of, as one of the founders of No Park Sale, which since 2013 has evolved and expanded into Evanston Parks and Lakefront Alliance. As I am sure you remember, the citizens of Evanston spoke loudly and clearly that Harley Clark should not be sold. We were delighted when IDNR stepped forward and said it would like to lease Harley Clark for its coastal management offices, and subsequently I learned the Illinois Coastal Education Center. And for office space and classes in ecology open to the public. IDNR assured us they had the money to rehab the building to meet its needs. Since it came as a surprise to read that now the city manager is asking for your authority to negotiate for the sale or lease, but it seems from the little I've heard, sale seems to be the operative word, of the building gives rise to several questions that I trust the city manager will answer while explaining what has transpired to bring us to this point. 1, what factors prompted the shift from lease of the building to selling it? 2, what specifically would be included in the sale negotiations? Buildings, land, What specifically? 3, what is the city asking or requiring IDNR to do to the building? Just code violations? What else beyond code violations? What has IDNR offered to do? Is there a difference between what each side is expecting the other side to do? If the city does sell the building, will the contract include a section stating that if at any time IDNR wants to vacate the building will automatically revert to the city at no cost to the city? We hope that all these questions will be answered when the city manager describes and explains his request to the committee. The citizens of Evanston are watching and expect the city council will act in the way the citizens of Evanston demanded a year ago. Thank you.
Linda Damashek, and I apologize if I butchered your last name.
Close enough. Linda Damashek, 1318 Judson. I'm here tonight representing the Evanston Parks and Lakefront Alliance to comment on the Harley Clark Mansion negotiation for 3 reasons. Number 1, we support the IDNR proposed use of the Harley Clark Mansion for an Illinois Coastal Education Center as presented to the public last winter. IDNR's proposed uses are compatible with Evanston citizens' goals of retaining the building in public ownership for public use for current and future generations. Number 2, we urge you to use caution with any plans to sell the building to the IDNR without safeguards built into the contract that would specifically protect the future use of the building if, for any reason, the IDNR would have to vacate the building at some point in the future. Number 3, we propose 2 specific types of contract language to include in the negotiations with the express purpose of protecting the future use of the building for future generations. 1, legal contract language that ensures that in the event that the IDNR would have to vacate the building for any reason, that ownership of the building would revert to the City of Evanston at no cost to the city. Number 2, legal contract language that stipulates that the building will be owned by public entities for public uses in perpetuity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Junad Risky.
Junad Risky, 2784 Sheridan. Speaking for myself tonight, again tonight, citizens may have a concern. The city may not be interested in negotiating with the state in a manner that will protect the public trust. There is that concern, I think, and that's why speakers are here possibly. The statement made to sell the property, of course, has changed things from a lease, and that means that there would be ownership. And a lease also could be long-term, which means it would be attractive for somebody else to use. And that's why I think all the speakers tonight here are questioning what's going on. And we want, as all the other speakers are saying, any deal has to be structured to protect the citizens. The reason I think there has been no negative actions against the Coastal Management Agency is because it is a natural use for the site. I believe in any deal we seek with them, we should be asking what we're going to get here to enhance that site for the citizens of Evanston beyond offices, and what will the state do, in my opinion, to integrate the site, which the city has never really done, to integrate all the uses there and to make it a site that's attractive to citizens to use in a much better manner that would be more beneficial to everyone in this community, and also would be an asset that would attract people to the community far more than some of the silly economic development activity we do here. And frankly, the idea of any kind of large maximum dollar return is of little interest to me when I know the situation of this city and how it's run, that this has to be done really for the public good is what's important. And it really, I think all the environmentalism here that we seem to have in the city, this is a perfect use of what I call real environmentalism that could work if done right. This council and this group have a responsibility to tell Mr. Bobkowitz what he should be negotiating, not tonight to walk out of here and say, go negotiate, Mr. Bobkowitz. You have a responsibility to set some criteria for him so he's not taken, because he's going to be blamed for whatever happens if he goes off and negotiates and comes back here and the citizens don't like it. But you have a responsibility as a council to tell him what he should be negotiating, and before he leaves to go off to negotiate, he should know. And it should be public. And frankly, I don't understand this legal description of the land to be sold should show a plot of survey in there so we know what's up to be discussed here. And finally, I believe the citizens should be allowed to listen into these negotiations. These should not be private negotiations, because these are two government agencies, not private parties. And a few citizens should be allowed to be there and listening in. So there is some trust. Thank you.
Jean Lindwell?
Needs to be involved with everything.
Good evening. Jean Lindwall, 625 Library Place. I was at the First Ward meeting last night, and Mr. Bobkowitz was there and shared a little bit of overview of what I'm sure you're going to be hearing in his presentation this evening. Based on that, I have a couple of comments. First, with respect to long-term lease of the land itself, which I understand is part of the negotiations. He mentioned rather than a single 75 to 99-year lease, as is common with many of Northwestern's holdings, for example. My preference would be a 25-year lease with optional 25-year extensions at the discretion of the state, assuming, of course, that they're continuing to operate the site in the continuing environmental education and compatible office uses that they've been discussing. With respect to the potential sale of the buildings, which Mr. Bobkowitz indicated was just contemplated for the two buildings, there are a number of questions. What will the process be for approving any exterior changes or improvements that might encroach onto the leased land? For example, what if IDNR wants to add an exterior elevator or ADA ramp to address access issues? How will that be handled? Will the Preservation Commission be able to provide meaningful review for any exterior alterations and changes, or will their recommendations and decisions be co-opted by either the City Council or city staff? What happens if this IDNR buys the buildings and 5 or 10 years down the road decides to move out? How does the city ensure that the use remains educational and public? Will we actually enforce our zoning ordinance, which currently limits the uses of that property for those kinds of uses? What are the limitations on IDNR or the state in selling the buildings to a private entity or transferring it to another state agency? And I agree with the speakers that if the IDNR decides that they don't need the buildings, the city should be able to, at a minimum, buy them back for the original sales price, whatever that may be. In the event of, and this is my personal feeling, and I think that's been expressed at various times through the discussions, in the event of an unsuccessful sales negotiation for the building, my preference would be for the buildings to be deconstructed in a sustainable manner and the entire site retained as public open space. Please do your due diligence. As a council, use your imagination and consider potential adverse impacts of the sale of the buildings. Make sure that the protections are in place and the city manager has the proper guidance to mitigate such impacts, and make sure that the language included in any sales contract is properly drafted so that we don't find ourselves in the situation as we did with the Art Center lease, which was very ambiguous as to who was responsible for what.
Jean, I need you to wrap up.
Okay, I'm just about done. Just basically, staff and the city council president and past councils really don't have a good track record in inspiring trust of residents, and I really hope that you will do better with this time. Our lakefront parks are just too important. Thank you.
Madeline Ducree. It is always great to see you here.
Thank you. Madeline Ducree, Fifth Ward, Alderman. I'm going to rush through this because I don't want my 3 minutes to be up before you
There you go.
clock me. Okay. I need transparency and clarification on the following issues. I wish the City Council will give more discussion on these following things and others. Number one, the general assistant funding. Number two, Citizen Police Academy administration or admission criteria. Number three, although Chief Editon is doing a good job bringing the transparency to the Evanston Police Department, I think that there's always room for more improvement. And we would like to know more about the NIPAS. Evanston, the city of Evanston will play a small part in the marijuana dispensary. But I think the health department need to give us, the public, a little bit more information on the amount of marijuana, how that's going to come about, etc. Let's see. Number 5, since the city have taken over the Township Assessor's Office and is now called the City of Evanston Property Tax Assessment Review Office, I really expected to see a little working together there with the city and Commissioner Larry Sufferin. His meeting is going to be tomorrow, etc. Okay, in addition, I am in support of the YOU headquarters that will hopefully materialize at the 1911 Church Street location by the summer of 2016. Mr. Green, Executive Director of the YOU, should be very happy with the combined efforts of the $2.5 million in property plus cash to support the YOU program. From the Lewis, I may mess up the name, Sebring Family Foundation and Pritzker. I am comfortable with that to a certain extent. If 700 students will be served from this youth program. Having said the above, I must confess I am not fully comfortable yet in my perception about how this transaction came about. But I will speak for myself tonight because I am still hurting in here. And the reason being, and if I am wrong in my conclusion, if the people are listening, please correct me, and I'll apologize, but I don't think so. In March or April of 2014, at our Fifth Ward meeting, the family and Mr. Green and the foundation, I'm not sure if they were there, but I was under the impression, as many others, that the people with the money, if you will, said that they will come back to the Fifth Ward meeting and tell us their visions, and they wanted to see our visions or our voice. I don't think this was done. And some of the people in the community is upset. I know this is their property, and I know this is their money. I got that loud and clear at the Fifth Ward meeting. But I took them all at their word. Again, we were waiting, we were visualizing Dino Robinson, the Hispanic people could have something into that program there, into that building. To me, it is very disrespectful on the way it was handled. And to our Fifth Ward alderman, and I would like to apologize publicly for blasting you out, Dolores Holmes, Fifth Ward alderman, because I thought you knew. The people in the community thought that many of you knew, and they did not. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Tar? You like Peggy, right? Not Margaret, right? Yes, okay. Just double checking.
Bill collectors and teachers call me Margaret.
I am neither.
Anyway, Peggy Tarr, and I live at 907 Sherman Avenue. Now, I've come to the council meeting several times about problems with Revolution Spin and the noise. What I wanted to bring to this committee was my concern about a police officer that's involved in our problem with Revolution Spin. This is an officer that I filed a complaint against in 2012, and I have to say I feel that she's harassing me at this point. I'm also disappointed because Police Chief Eddington is aware that I filed a complaint against this officer. I think she has no business being involved as a problem solver. The other issue, which I will not go into, is also, as our city manager knows, and that's about one of the administrative hearing officers who, in my opinion, also made a decision that was pro-Revolution Spin. Now, you know, I'm really tired of this. I'm tired of hearing the noise. I'm tired of having to come before you. I'm hoping that something can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tarr. Next agenda item is Human Services Funding Summit. Originally, we had talked about having the funding summit on October 6th, and we are changing that to November 3rd at a regularly scheduled Human Services meeting that we're going to pull the groups together. Do we need anything else on that?
Same time.
Same time? 7:30. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Bobkowitz.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, our preference would be to have it earlier.
That's great. 6 o'clock?
I think based on the Rules Committee's actions earlier
Great.
this evening, we'll just follow that.
Super. 6 o'clock. November 3rd. Mental Health Board, you're good with that? Fantastic. And it will be this committee, CDBG committee, Mental Health Board, and we'll be inviting also the not-for-profits in the community that give grants to not-for-profits in the community to participate as well. Great. Next item is police. We're actually moving to police complaints, as well as we're moving up HH6, Citizen Police Academy admission criteria. Do you want to talk about the admission criteria? And does anybody have any comments about the police complaints? Any questions? Yeah.
I apologize. I was just checking the calendar. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that November the 3rd is the day before the general election. And sometimes that's an issue and sometimes that's not. There are no municipal issues on the ballot. I just wanted to put it out there that it's the day before the general election. All right? Thank you.
Anybody? Thoughts? Concerns?
Just while you're all
Okay.
here, I wanted to make mention. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bobkowitz. Any questions, police complaints? Great. Thank you for the communication. It's always very helpful to see that in the packet.
Sergeant Collier, Evanston Police Department Community Strategies Bureau. I'm here to speak about the
Okay, yeah,
here to speak about the criteria for the Citizens Police Academy.
thank you.
I'm not sure whether we're talking about the adult criteria or the juvenile criteria, so I'll speak about both. The adult criteria is anyone over the ages of 18 years of age who live and or work in the city of Evanston. Also, you may be accepted or put in an application if you are interested or going to school for anything in law enforcement or criminal justice. And that's for the adults. For the juveniles, is anyone between the ages of 13 and 17 years of age that also live in Evanston or work in Evanston. When it comes to juveniles, we also do a background check, and we also do a criminal background check on the adults. For the adults, we use leads. We do a complete criminal history on the adults. For the juveniles, we refer them to the Juvenile Detective Bureau and our youth services. And that is the extent of the juvenile criminal background check. So when it comes to juveniles, there is no, if you have a criminal history or criminal record, you are not allowed into the program. You definitely can be allowed into the program. When it comes to adults, we do an extensive background check. To my knowledge to date, we started the juvenile program in 2012, and since 2012, we have had no one that we have not allowed into the program. As far as the adult criteria is concerned, this has been going on for about 19 years now, and to my knowledge, only 2 persons have not been allowed into the program. Those 2 persons, one person was deemed mentally unstable. He had constantly or consistently threatened to do bodily harm to the police with firearms. He's been committed several times, and he's been arrested for weapons charges several times. The other person, pretty much the same thing. In addition to those items, he also used the police department on his state ID, state driver's license, as his address and listed it with his name first and Evanston Police Department, and then the address. So he was not allowed into the program. If you had any other questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any other question? Alderman Holmes?
No, no other question. I just wanted to comment that I believe this came out of our last meeting, if I remember correctly, and it really did deal with the juveniles because some people were not aware that background checks were done on the juveniles. So hopefully this will answer that and to let them know.
Like I said, those background checks are, when we say criminal in nature, it just is limited to just talking to the Juvenile Detective Bureau and Youth Services and getting an idea of who we are accepting into the program.
Alderman Tendem?
Thank you. Is that information listed on the application or?
Yes, it is posted. We sent out the Instagrams, Facebook, city website, and all of the information is listed right there, what the criteria is.
But the criteria, the background checks, is that noted on the, it's on, okay.
It's on page 117 in your packet.
And if you need copies of that, I do have copies.
No, I do have it on,
Okay.
thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Citizens Police Academy, I went through it. I got in. It was fantastic. Always a good experience. I've done the welcome at the graduation a couple times. So Lois is doing a fantastic
Thank you.
job.
We
And
believe
thank
it's
you
a-
for putting it together.
We believe it's a very positive program, and we want to keep it as such. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Moving on to number 3, Mr. Bob Quitz.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. Here to talk about the Harley Clark Mansion. I think, as you're aware, but I think it's important to reinforce for members of the community, this is a discussion that we began in 2012 about what to do with the Harley Clark Mansion. We've gone through a variety of iterations, and for the last 9 months or so, we have been talking with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources about their interest in the use of the Harley Clark Mansion for offices for their coastal management program. There was a presentation that they made to the community back in January, and since then we have been talking with them about the opportunity for them to use the mansion. The focus of our discussions have largely revolved around the condition of the mansion. As you know, there were studies done by the city regarding code issues. There were studies done by Tawani Enterprises when they were considering the use of the building, and at least one other group, I think. I think we had done some additional. So there's probably were 2 city studies plus the Tawani studies. So the state of Illinois took those studies, reviewed them, had representatives of their General Services Department review them. They have toured the mansion. They have prepared lists of repairs that they feel that are necessary for the building. We've gone over the last couple of months through those lists, and they've made it clear they're so interested and excited about the use of the building that they believe a full restoration is required. We were looking at numbers in the $2 million range initially with them. Those numbers are now in the $5 to $6 million range. And as the state has looked at those numbers and looked at the repairs that are needed, they approached the city and indicated a willingness to purchase the mansion and the coach house. They are looking at a variety of different funding sources to make these improvements, and it will be easier for them to gather up the $5 to $6 million needed for the improvements if they have ownership of the building versus a lease arrangement. That it's difficult for some of the funders, both within the state of Illinois and within the federal government, because as I think the council is aware, much of the funding for the coastal management program comes from the federal government. They will have greater flexibility in accessing that money in a timely manner with ownership of the building. There was an interest in owning the property. We had discussions regarding that, and I conveyed to them, based on the council's previous discussions and certainly the community's discussions that have been already referred to this evening, that any sale of property was not something that the city of Evanston would consider. And let me repeat that so there's no misunderstanding, that the sale of property was not something that would be considered. The state is very interested in making sure that the property is integrated, as one of the speakers mentioned this evening, into sort of a larger conservancy effort. I think we both sides have agreed that perhaps that will make more sense further down the road, but really we need to keep a focus on the mansion and the coach house. So we have proposed instead a sale of the mansion and the coach house with a long-term lease of the property. As it was mentioned, the 100 years has been the number that we have talked about. Again, until I am given formal official approval by the City Council by ordinance to complete these discussions, we will not have any final terms to share with you and the community. But at this point, we are talking about a long-term, likely 100-year lease of the land underneath the buildings, no additional property involved, and the sale of the mansion and the coach house. The state has indicated some interest in having permit access to some parking, again, along the lines that the Evanston Arts Center already uses, so that would likely also be part of an agreement, some long-term access to parking spaces, certainly during the business day, Monday through Friday, to have access to a limited amount of parking. Otherwise, we're talking about the two buildings and the land underneath them for lease, and that is all. The state very much wants to focus on a restoration that will serve them well over a long period of time. So we're going to do that. As far as conditions of any sale, certainly my feeling is that the council's desire and the community's desire is that this building be used for the purposes in which it's being sold and no other purposes. And language would be drafted between attorneys for the state and Mr. Farrar, representing the city of Evanston, to ensure to the greatest extent possible that those uses remain with the state of Illinois and for conservancy efforts. If those were to change or those circumstances to change, I would ask for your direction to ensure that the city have the opportunity either to have the building provided back to us or for no cost or for some cost. I think that the practical reality is that the state of Illinois, if they're going to invest a significant amount of money in improvements in the building, will probably not look to want to give it back, at least not initially. Perhaps there's an opportunity for us to have a schedule of some sort that once the improvements are amortized out, that we would then perhaps get it back at no cost. That may also come into play with a sale price of the building, and it certainly would look to the committee and the council's direction as far as priorities go, because perhaps if there is no sales price or the sales price is credited against the improvements, then perhaps a reversion at no cost makes more sense. The exterior improvements, certainly, as was mentioned this evening, we can make sure that there's language in there that those would require a city review. They are already working with the Illinois historic preservation officials for the state of Illinois, who are already very concerned about the building, and as a customer of them, or the ID&R having a relationship with them, they are already hearing about those issues as well. So I don't think there'd be any issue. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I think we've been very transparent. We are here under the city code. This is an exercise in transparency to have this committee recommend to the council adoption of the ordinance and then have that ordinance read twice before any final agreement would then come back to you for final approval and direction to me to execute the agreement. So I think I've answered at least the questions that were raised this evening, which were raised last night at Alderman Fisk's meeting. I'm happy to elaborate in any of those that you would like.
Alderman Fisk?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Wally, can you tell us a little bit more about
the discussions you've had about funding, and why funding would be easier if they own the property rather than leasing the property?
I can basically just share what I've been told by them is that in order to come up with the dollar amounts that we are now talking, that $5 to $6 million, they are having to look at additional revenue sources. And it has been portrayed to me by officials from IDNR that those additional revenue sources will be, they will be able to tap into them if they have ownership of the building.
Are those public or private revenue
I
sources?
believe these are all public sources.
Okay. Does anyone else want to comment?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
because
are you-
I'd
go
like to
ahead.
comment afterwards.
Okay. Alderman Tenden?
That actually was my question as well. I know we were originally talking about primarily money funded streaming from the federal government, but I think it would be imperative to have all that funding, the whole purchase price, if we are to sell it, settled, or at least knowing where most of it's coming from, because I worry about state funding if that's part of the equation, but I worry that there are so many things up in the air politically that this deal really could go down badly. So I have a lot of reservations about selling, but I do think ultimately that's the answer to taking the liability of the property off of our backs. So I guess I'm still up in the air, but would like a lot of the information. I think many of the comments, obviously, you've noted from the citizen comment, and I think all of those were very, very good. So I'm glad we can pursue a lot of those, including the issue of what maybe benefits might there be for Evanstonians to be on or near the property, including classes or any kind of events that would be held there. It would be nice to know that they are keeping some spaces open for public use, if that is in fact their plan. So,
And Alderman Tenden, members of the committee, I think in the discussions we've had up till now that there will be a limited amount of public space that's there for events. They've been very open to discussions about making that available. I don't think they have any interest in renting it out for weddings, bar mitzvahs, anything like that. But if there was a need for a 6th Ward meeting, a 7th Ward meeting, some sort of community gathering.
I meant more some things related more to preservation and environment and lake issues.
And I think that there is a keen interest from IDNR to have further discussions, but they too are sensitive to timing. They too see a window to have a deal and have that formalized and executed between the city and the state, and they do not want to jeopardize in any way having that initial deal done. We have talked about language. Perhaps there would be a separate letter of agreement or a memorandum of understanding that would be a side memorandum dealing with some of the programmatic issues, and would commit both sides to continued discussions in future months and future years ahead. But I believe that the state is also keenly aware of timing, and they would like very much to conclude this deal in the next few months in order to make sure that it can move forward.
Alderman Fisk?
I think it's important to sort of back up and remember that when we were first discussing this, the information was shared with us and very obvious that when the city acquired this property, it acquired it and various other properties around the city in order to increase the amount of parkland that would be available to the citizens of Evanston. And for that reason, I was willing to support the lease of the property and not lease of the buildings, but no sale of the property. And I'm still of that position. I think we're taking a step backwards if we actually sell the buildings. I hear what you say about protections and side agreements and covenants and all of that, but it makes me uncomfortable. I have been involved in preservation for many years in Evanston, and I'm, as I said earlier, I would almost support, rather than the sale of the building, the dismantling of the building and putting it aside. Hopefully somebody else would build it in another location, but to increase the amount of parkland and beachland that's available for the citizens. I think that makes I think that's most consistent with the goal that we set when we acquired the property. So for that reason, I certainly would support a lease. I understand what you say about funding and that they're now looking, instead of the $2 million, up to $6 million, which was, I think, to put it in A1 condition. I would rather they lease the property and use the $2 million and then over time do the additional work on it that they would deem necessary. But I really, at this point, can only support a lease of the property.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, and I appreciate Alderman Fisk's comments, I think we're entering a very critical juncture with the building, and that if this is not something the council feels comfortable with, I would want to move forward rather quickly, at least obtaining a dollar amount as to what it would cost to deconstruct the building. Because we would need to deconstruct the building next year.
Right, and I did ask for that information some time ago.
And I think we had round numbers that varied widely. And I think that if there's any hesitation of the council, if it comes out of committee this evening, if it's not passed for first reading next week, I think I would contract immediately with a firm to give us a firm number, because with the budget coming up, I think we had numbers of $400,000 to $2 million. It was a very, very wide amount. So if we're going to need to budget that money for next year, we need to know what impact that would have on the city budget for next year. And so, but I think to let the opportunity not move forward and have the building sit empty as of January 31st is not something I would recommend to the city council.
Thanks.
And I don't believe there's any other user out there that would occupy the building and for a lease and put in $2 million plus and have it be a use that I think the community and the council has said will not be a private use, will be a public use. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's another entity out there. Mm-hmm. So I respect whatever judgment and whatever direction I'm given by the council. Mm-hmm. My recommendation to you, however, is that if we aren't able to move forward with IDNR, that we would then actively move forward with at least understanding what it will take to demolish the building.
Alderman Holmes?
That one of my questions was there anyone else out there anywhere who had any interest in this building? I didn't think that because I thought maybe you'd bring that to our attention if there had been any other inquiries about it.
But when there are inquiries, they are for commercial uses.
Right, and which we took that off of the table. I guess I am comfortable with the sale of the building. Not the land. I think we all agree to that. And if we can trust the legal system to put in the kinds of covenants that would ensure the return of the property, the use of it, that kind of thing, I'm very comfortable with it. And I would suggest that we move, I would want to make a motion to move it on to council.
Alderman Braithwaite? I think that's right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on something that I heard from Alderman Holmes. I'd also support the leasing of the building, the ownership of the land. But something that bothered me the last time that we discussed Harley Park is that we didn't really have a policy or something to guide us through the whole process. And I don't know if now is the time to ask for it, but at some point in the future, it would be nice to have some type of policy or guidelines to move us through a clear process that involves the community when it comes to selling public property. And I think we've revisited this maybe 2 or 3 budget seasons when we looked at possibly selling Chandler, looking at some of our other public properties. I feel like this issue will come back to haunt us again, whether it's this council or future council. So at some point to the city manager, as we're looking at all the details for this deal, if we can look at it in a more general scope as it would pertain to any public property that the city of Evanston owns, I think that would be very helpful.
And Alderman Braithwaite, members of the committee, I think that the sections of the Evanston Municipal Code that are requiring us to have the discussion tonight are in part that many communities don't have this process that they would go forward. A sale would always have to be approved at a public meeting, but the direction would not come through an ordinance, would not require the 2 readings. So I think that's part of the challenge. I think the city has basically said that you're not interested. The city council said you're not interested really in sales of property. Even in the worst of times, that's not something that you've looked at. And as we started in 2012 talking about the Noyes Cultural Arts Center and Chandler and Harley Clark, only Harley Clark was really left on the table, I think, because of the concern about the condition. We don't have another, knock on wood, Harley Clark in our portfolio. So certainly, if the committee would like, we can revisit this at another meeting. But I think the process we're going through tonight, in part, was created to allow there to be this discussion and citizen input.
Alderman Fisk?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite, for bringing that up, because I think that's important. We have had some casual inquiries about the possibility of purchasing other structures on our lakefront, and I think we do need to have a thoughtful discussion about that, because I think that extends to structures in our, on parkland throughout the city of Evanston. And all of these are public buildings, and as much as the coastal management program is going to be run out of there, this still is not going to be a public building any longer. It's going to be a private building, and that's something I just don't feel comfortable with.
And Alderman Fisk, with all due respect, everything that the state of Illinois has told me is this is a public building.
Public building, yeah.
And it will be open during regular business hours. It will have space for meetings. It will have offices that are open and accessible. I guess it depends on how one categorizes it, but I don't want anyone to be thought that there's going to be a locked door and it will not be accessible. It will be accessible.
Right, but it's going to be very different than the public buildings that we're used to.
There are different types of public buildings. I think that they're going to have classes and that kind of thing. I mean, but it is with the state, so it is public, right?
Well,
yes.
It just in
officially a public building.
Officially a public building.
And so since everyone's had, I have a few comments. Around the programming, many of the programming for our residents, we subsidize. So if we have residents that are lower moderate income, we help give grants to people to do programs through our Parks and Rec programs. So if IDNR is saying they're going to do programs here and it's going to be public, is it just going to be public for the wealthy? Or is it going to be public, and are we going to start subsidizing the programs for IDNR through the city's money in order for all of our residents to have access? I think that's something we really need to talk about. Every time we talk about the lakefront, I get a little alarmed that we're just keeping the lakefront for the wealthy in the community and not for all of the community. Needs to be addressed. I think it's also interesting that IDNR hasn't been here to a committee or to the council, really, to present on what they want to do, and talking about these programs, talking about their idea of, is it going to be public? Is there going to be access cards to get into this office space? I have serious concerns about that. The notion of limited amount of space for public use, again, I mean, under the previous plan that was discussed for this site, more of the public could go in to the space than what's being presented now, quite frankly. If you're there for a meeting with IDNR, you could go in, but I don't know that you could just go in and walk around the building or have a coffee or have a drink on the terrace of the building. So again, we're talking about it's owned by a public entity, but really, is the public going to be allowed to really utilize the building the same way? So I find it very suspect that we're saying it's a public, for the public use, when really it's not. I also am glad to hear that the amount of the renovations keeps going up. We kept saying that and kept saying, oh, no, it's only $2 million. And as people get in there and really look at the building, that number just keeps going up and up and up. So it's, as always, refreshing to know that some of us on the council were right about how much it would cost. The other comment is, I think we started talking well before 2012 about what to do with Harley Clark. I know that we started talking about it at least the first year that I was on council, which was 2009. I think there was discussion when I was on Plan Commission well before that, but Alderman Holmes, you would probably know better than I. So I think that this has been a conversation for a very long time. It would be good to hear from IDNR, particularly around the notion of, are these programs just for people that can afford it, or do we care about people in this whole community to have access? So we need a motion on this.
I move that we move this on to council.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh.
Pardon me?
Alderman Holmes, do you recommend to move it to council to go forward with negotiation?
With the note, as the city manager has requested, which is to negotiate, yes.
The sale.
With
And its adoption of the ordinance.
the adoption of the ordinance.
Sale
Okay.
of the buildings, but not
And not the land.
So we got a motion from Alderman Holmes. We have a second from Alderman Tendem. We have approval from Alderman Braithwaite, Holmes, and Tendem. Any opposed? No. So we have 3, 4, 2 against.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So it goes on to council. Next up, you are up. Great. Antibiotics in farm animals. So can you state your name?
Yeah.
And what organization you're with?
My name is Jessica Fuya, and I'm the Illinois organizer for Food and Water Watch. We are a national consumer advocacy organization with an office in Chicago and over 300 members in the city of Evanston. So I've sent you quite a few materials, and my understanding is that we also had an intern who was here speaking approximately 2 months ago, so I'll try not to
And he did a
bore
great
you.
job.
We were very pleased to have him.
Fantastic.
So I don't want to bore you by repeating too many of the details. I would love to answer questions depending on what your interest is. So the World Health Organization in 2014 reported that a future in which antibiotics are no longer effective for treating humans in a medical setting is not just an apocalyptic fantasy for the future, it is an inevitability and something that needs our direct and immediate attention. The Center for Disease Prevention and Control in 2013 also warned that antibiotics are losing their effectiveness. And at Food and Water Watch, we know that 80% of the antibiotics that are sold by weight are used in agriculture, fed to livestock. And for the most part, that occurs for 2 reasons. One of which is to keep animals in concentrated feeding operations, which is why we're able to, access vast quantities of meat at low prices. But it's also used to make animals grow quite a bit faster. And this is called, or it was called until very recently, the non-therapeutic use of antibiotics, which is differentiated from treating animals which are already sick so that they will get better. This is a problem because this is generating the type of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are mentioned by the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Bacteria that have become immune to antibiotics because because animals have been fed low doses over long periods of time. This bacteria threatens farmers and people living in rural communities, people who eat meat, but also threatens vegetarians and practically anyone who is alive in the world, whether near or far to the farm. Just one hospital in the city of Chicago reports that it spends between $13 and $18 million in just 1 year treating antibiotic-resistant infections. And we know that in the United States, over 2 million people every year are infected with antibiotic-resistant infections, and 23,000 of those people die. So this is not just a problem for the future, it's a problem that we're having now, and one that we can easily take steps to resolve by limiting the non-therapeutic use of antibiotics on factory farms, or that would be reducing the amount of antibiotics that are fed to animals when they are not when they are not sick. So this is not a novel idea in the European Union. This is happening in different intensities, and in the state of Denmark, they phased out the non-therapeutic use of antibiotics completely. They are still the #1 producer of pork in the world. So this has been not only proven possible, but effective and cost-effective at that. So why am I here talking to you about this? Primarily, the city of Evanston is a place where there are many people who are both politically active, who are very conscious about their eating habits, and are instigators of positive change at a number of levels. Your Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is already a supporter of federal measures to reduce antibiotic abuse on factory farms. But there are some very important people in Congress who are represented by the state of Illinois, and we would love to be sending them a strong and clear message about the urgency of this issue and how we all feel. So there are currently 17 other cities in the United States from coast to coast, which have called upon Congress to get off their duffs and make a move on this urgent and important issue, and we hope that Evanston will be one of them. Over 200 people have signed petitions specifically addressing the city council, asking them to move forward on this issue. And over the last 2 years, I've heard from hundreds more who have written directly to Congress. So without, I guess, a stronger voice from leaders in our communities, but also leaders of our municipal governments, we won't see the kind of action that's needed. And we would love to, I guess, add Evanston to the groundswell of support for addressing this issue.
Great.
Questions?
Alderman Holmes.
I would recommend, take staff recommendation to adopt Resolution 62-R-14.
Alderman Fisk, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were.
Well, I'm going to rain on the parade a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
I absolutely support everything you say. I mean, I absolutely do. Vegetarians in my family, no question about it. I personally will not purchase meat that has any antibiotics in it or where animals have been treated. However, I don't think this is appropriate for our city council. I think it's wonderful that Jan Schakowsky is supporting, and I certainly support her support of it, but I just don't think this is a resolution that is appropriate for us. Now, if you were coming here asking us to ban the sale of meat that has antibiotics in it in Evanston, then that would be, I think, appropriate for us to take action on. But it's a series of resolutions that we've seen over the years that I really just don't think are appropriate for this legislative body. So,
Any other comments? Thank you. I think it's exactly appropriate for us, and we've done this on other resolutions, and you are extremely well presented for your organization. So thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? So we have a motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So,
No.
so 3-2. Yeah. Nay, I'm sorry.
Nay. Me, I said me. I said nay.
You okay over there, Alderman Tendum? So we got 3 to 2. It's moving on to council, and then it'll be there on Monday for the introduction.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, career pathways. You're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Building Careers Pathway to Sustainable Employment Program with the Youth Job Center agreement for 2014, and to recommend the approval of our third agreement. We've had 2 successful classes go through and participate in this best practice program. We've had success that has been beyond national data and statistics. And it has just been a phenomenally successful program for the city of Evanston. We do have with us Karen. She's the brand new executive director for the Youth Job Center. I'd like to introduce her to you. Would you come up, please? just like to introduce her to the committee. She will be making a formal introduction at some point to the City Council, but just introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm Karen Tolinar Demarest, and I'm delighted to be serving in this role. I've been on the job just a couple days now, so I know enough to be dangerous, so all questions go to our Director of Programs. But thank you for having us here, and thank you for all your support.
And welcome to Evanston, because you come from the Northwest, correct? Fantastic.
The results of the initial pilot program have been very successful and impressive. They're consistent with the national models using these workforce development strategies. 80% of the career pathways interns were considered high risk and faced multiple barriers to employment. In the first year, 70% of those interns completed their job readiness program, and 60% obtained employment, and nearly 60% obtained certification credentials. In year 2, the program got better and improved. A second cohort of 23 Evanstonians ages 18 to 25 enrolled, and 100% of participants completed the job readiness program. 19 participants were placed on paid on-the-job training assignments, and upon completion of those assignments, those individuals will be placed in permanent employment. So the program has been beyond our expectations, and we are encouraging you to continue it.
Great. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
So we need a motion?
To accept the report.
Yes. Okay.
Second.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. We have the general assistance report. Does anybody have any questions about that? We appreciate the communication on it.
I have.
Please, I'll
I've got to pull it up. 1 second.
if there's anything you'd like to share, that's great. If
I'm available, Yvonne Thomas Smith, Health Director, to answer any questions. I do have additional good news.
Great.
We just did a partnership with Oakton Community College. They're providing GED courses. So we had our testing just this past Tuesday, and we tested 10 voluntary participants, and all of them are going to start the GED program, and they scored very high, so it's likely that they will go on and take the exam and be successful. So we're excited about that.
That's great.
Where are those classes going to be held?
They're going to be held here.
Here, in the city?
In the Civic Center.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
There are way too many lights at the same time. Alderman Holmes, you waited too long.
No,
so now,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to go with Alderman Tandem. I'm not sure who came first, but then Alderman Braithwaite, you're.
And then I'll come back because I do really have a question. Okay, but
There's a light involved.
I know.
I'm kidding.
I'll go
I'm
to the
kidding.
blue
I'm
light.
kidding.
No.
Go for it.
Thank
Alderman
you.
Tandem.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Have there been a lot of inquiries about the assessor's former services at the township? And what, if so, what have we done to refer them to county or something like that?
I apologize. I'm not inclined to answer that because I'm not aware of it, but maybe the city manager can address that. Thanks.
Alderman Tennant, members of the committee, AMPW is the place that we are going to be providing updates regularly. I've asked Marty to do that quarterly. The commissioner's having an event tomorrow. We put it in our e-news, which reaches 37,000 subscribers in Evanston. So we are working. People are coming in, and it's very much business as it was with the township.
But not for the assessors?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay, great.
I mean, we have the single staff person that is there. She takes appointments. It is about the same as it was prior.
Great, thank you.
We have information on our website. People call through 311. They make appointments. My understanding is it's been pretty seamless. We'll give you a report. Our plan is to do it quarterly at AMPW.
Have you had any feedback in terms of people still going over on Main Street?
I've not heard of any. Those spaces are now occupied by the
I know they are,
uses,
but
so.
I just wondered, had you heard any feedback on that? Because
I don't
got
know.
some.
On the GA side, it's
I have
a little
not.
bit more active.
Huh?
For whatever it's worth, I haven't. I mean, I know the
Yeah,
the
I
two
know, and I'm
businesses
just
that
trying
are
to
over
wondering
there.
how we are, I guess in the beginning there were signs maybe come to the Civic Center. I'm not sure. Do we ever do anything like that?
I think it was well publicized at the time. It's been now just about a year
Correct.
that the service, both the assessing services and the GA services moved here.
I understand that, and I'm going to say one more time, everybody does not use the internet, everybody doesn't get the newspaper, but I thought in the beginning there was a little paper sign or something over there that said has moved to the Civic Center, and I'm just sort of wondering, I don't know why it's coming up now. Maybe it's because it's time for border reviews and that kind of thing. And I know that Commissioner Suffren and some other aldermen from Chicago are doing the session here, I believe, tomorrow night.
No other alderman.
It's a Chicago alderman. I got wrote one of those phone calls. So it is a Chicago alderman that's going to be working with Commissioner Suffren tomorrow night.
And that's not how it's been publicized.
Oh, okay. But regardless, I mean, that's going to happen. So we know that. So those of us who have that kind of service hear it. But there's some people, I guess, that are going over there now and not knowing where to go because they didn't know that they're moving.
I just want to add some additional information to that. There was a paper sign on the door prior to the new occupants giving them our number and then calling 311. And then what we did early on, maybe about in January, we took the blue and white flyers that was made by Citizens Engagement and took them to the beauty supply store and the laundromat over there, because I do frequent that location, and people were coming in there asking where they were moved to. So those blue and white flyers in English and Spanish are still on the counter.
Oh, okay, great. I know. I just had the inquiry, so I just wondered if we'd been getting it up here as well.
And I appreciate that. A lot of our clients that are coming into our doors are learning where we are word of mouth from other participants, and we haven't gotten any feedback that no one can find us. But I know those cards are still over there because I frequent that beauty supply right there at the corner. And then again, a lot of the families are learning word of mouth where we're located.
Alderman Braithwaite?
I was actually going to ask a question while our city manager was up, and it's a follow-up to a statement made by Alderman Tandem and a question from Madeline Decree. And are there any future plans to work with Larry Suffredin's office in terms of our current assessor's position?
We work every day.
Okay.
Madeline's daughter is the staff member, so if there's issues, I'm unaware of them, but we work every day. The event, our staff will be there at the event tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening. If there's additional issues that I'm unaware of, I would certainly welcome hearing them, but it's a pretty rote process. We have access to all of the same systems that we've had access to previously, and we're serving people.
Thank you.
Alderman Holmes.
Now, I really do have a question. I looked at the report very carefully, very good report, thank you. And I also looked at the budget, and I know it's budget time for us, and I'm assuming that the township budget will be, or the general assistance budget will be developed right along now with our regular budget.
That is correct.
So I'm looking at the budget that you have attached.
Yes.
And what I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I try to look very carefully, but I did not see an area or a category for things that I'm concerned about. I mentioned it last year. We said we'd make sure that it happened. I did not see the veterans flags. I don't see a category for that, the West End Market, assistance for rent, and mortgages and utilities. I just don't, it may be there. I just don't know where it is. Can you help me with that?
Sure. The first area, the veteran flags, and I think we called it community action programs, actually was built into the executive summary of the budget. It didn't have a byline in the it was in the narrative of the executive summary, and I know we're having a meeting tomorrow about the GA budget, and I've made sure that that's in the narrative summary of the budget when we're going to discuss it. So on the document that you have before you, the veteran flags, the community action plan, which is a dollar amount, is in the summary. But the rental assistance is on page 122 of 30, and it's under the...
I'm looking there, and tell me where it is.
It's sure. The first bullet point, bold statement says operating revenues, total revenue, and then the fourth bold section says clients.
Yeah.
And then the client rental expense, the budgeted amount was $288,000, and the total amount we've spent from January to June 30th is the $134,000.
Wait a minute. Now, I think I'm looking where you.
Are you on page 122 of 130?
Right. But I thought that was the client GA assistance rent that you're talking about.
So what that category represents, how much we pay on behalf of each participant per month for rental assistance. The maximum amount that we pay per participant is $200.
Right.
So that dollar amount that's reflected there is the amount we've paid through June 30th.
Okay, so what I guess I'm talking about emergency assistance.
Oh, okay, sure.
So
Emergency assistance is all the way at the bottom. It's under total client medical expenses, and the next bold section says emergency assistance,
So that's
EAS.
okay, I got you. Okay.
So the first breakdown is housing assistance, and that really represents mortgage, condo association, and rental properties.
Okay.
And then the budgeted dollar amount is there for you, and the dollar amount that we've spent through June 30th is $27,000.
And the reason why I'm asking this because I want to be able to look for it when the new budget comes out. So I was sort of using this as my guide.
And this is the same guide that I'm using to help with the budget team build a budget that you can discuss and review.
And so now where am I going to see the veterans flags? I guess I just need to see it.
Correct. It's not in this document because it wasn't a separate budget line, but it'll be in the executive summary. Now, if you want, we can put a separate line to, in the actual budget document itself. We can make that addition.
I think that we need to, and I'm going to say that I think we need to do it because people need to know that we're really doing that, and so that there won't be a question about it.
Sure.
And because I know that's one of the first questions that somebody's going to ask me. So who's going to pay for the flag? So I want to make sure.
And I appreciate you asking that because I had to investigate what that actually was. Because I wasn't clear when I saw it in the summary, but we'll add it to a byline of the budget to be transparent.
Okay.
And the questions that our resident Madeline Decree had, I did address all of her questions with the documents
Fine,
that I
thank
presented
you.
tonight.
Okay, great.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Alderman Holmes, for forcing us to pay attention to this. Last year, I think through general assistance or the budget, we provided support for the senior handyman senior program.
That's correct.
And I'm just looking through, is it somewhere?
That's correct. That falls under the community action programs that were all in the executive summary. So they were the veteran flags, the
West End Market.
The West End Market.
Can you just break all those out with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, we can do that.
One of the challenges we're going to have is some of these things will become general fund expenses and they won't be GA expenses. The town fund is gone. And so we're going to continue to provide everything we've provided. Some of these community action expenses were sort of a grab bag of things, if you will. And I think we want to be very clear that that grab bag is now the general fund. And so as long as the council views it that way, GA is going to be the traditional participant general assistance and emergency assistance only. So those things that were in the town fund budget are now part of the general fund. We will identify it as clearly as we possibly can, but we want to make sure that you and the community are aware that that's all going to be general fund, not the general assistance fund, since the town fund has gone away. All right, so we will have that. So really, some of these things become like any other allocation from the city through the general fund budget. I think for a while, the township budget was kind of viewed as a separate pot. And, for some of those other services, it's no longer a separate pot. It is part of the general fund, which then competes with everything else. So it's up to the council ultimately what you fund with the whole budget, of course. But some of these things that were in the town fund are now part of the general fund and will be appropriately labeled. We're not going to have them as part of the GA fund because we want people in the community to understand that that line on the property tax is just general assistance only moving forward.
Other questions around general assistance report? Alderman Holmes, you have a very serious look on your face.
I sure do, because I'm not real comfortable with that, but I need to digest it a little bit more, because when you then get into the big arena of the general fund with some of these tiny little things. I don't remember, handyman, what, maybe 20,000, something like that. Yeah, Western Market 5, the Veterans Flag, I don't know, can't remember what $750, something like that. I mean, it's peanuts in the general fund, but it gets lost. And that really troubles me. I'm sorry, it just troubles me.
Well, and my concern, going back to the handyman, is that we need even more money for the handyman.
That's true.
And so the question, and this is something for the council, we've not ever done this before, which pot do you want to take some of these things out of? I mean, if you want general assistance to be more than traditional general assistance as a home rule community, we're making this up kind of as we go along. So really, the general assistance account no longer is tied formally to township law. It's tied morally, because I think the council's made it very clear we're going to continue that program absolutely pursuant to state law. But the amount that we have on the property tax bill is at the discretion of the city council.
And I hear that, and I just want to hear our words that we said to people, that we would still provide to the community the services offered by township. That, we said that. I mean, we really did say that. So I hear you, and I mean, I understand. I just have to, I got to see it. I'm not seeing it clearly yet.
Alderman Holmes, this is also probably a good piece to bring up at the joint meeting we're going to have with Human Services and Mental Health, because the handyman program also receives funding from
CDGB,
and that's a good time to talk about the overall different buckets and looking at that in a comprehensive way. So I think that'd be a good thing to add as, I would say, agenda item, something to discuss.
Make sure that we stay, because that's one of the things that you hear. And I know maybe some of you guys don't hear the scuttle. I hate to call it the scuttlebutt, but you don't hear the conversations that we have and the feedback we hear from the community in terms of we're not keeping our word in terms of what we said we were going to do. And so I try to stay as clear to that as I can. So when I'm pushing for those things, it's because people are asking.
And that was part of our reason for not supporting the dissolution. We were very nervous for this exact day, and I'll speak to that as well. And we're speaking specifically for the population, the overall demographic that the township serves. And so there was a lot of concern that once the city takes over, that a lot of the services and support that they provided for those members of the community would slowly disappear in the larger budget. And so here we are, having the beginning of that conversation, and I just want everyone to be present to it,
and
so
I want to
no
vehemently
confusion.
Say that this is absolutely not what we're talking about. That we have a general assistance fund that we have operated as we've always operated. We have a town fund that's the issue, and so. If the council wants to create a small fund that's a community services fund that is funded by the general fund, that's perfectly fine. But this is in no way, shape, or form trying to in any way change the delivery of the service. All of the mental health board issues came from the town fund, not the general assistance fund. We're trying to make sure that we have enough money for all of this. We're looking at the general fund is continuing to have a greater and greater contribution toward these services. So please, I don't want anyone to leave here tonight thinking that anywhere we're changing that, but the general assistance fund of the township will continue to fund general assistance with the city. And that is not changing. These other services, if the council wishes to aggregate a sub-fund of the general fund, create a separate fund so that everyone in the community sees how these other programs that were funded by the town fund are done, then that's fine. The assessor services, for example, are all in the general fund. We have made that a part of the Department of Administrative Services budget. Per previous discussions that we had over the last year and a half. But if the council wants a separate fund for these town fund social services, we can either do that, there's any number of ways we can do that, but they were never part of the general assistance fund.
But Mr. Ropkowitz, I would say that that's what we're trying to, I guess, avoid in some ways with the Human Services meeting, of saying, looking at all these things and saying, how can we do better in a comprehensive way, so it's not a piecemeal. That we're going to say the handyman fund is important, and from these different buckets, this is how much we've been spending. Let's figure out which bucket's going to come from, versus really looking at it as a little bit here and a little bit there that we're then trying to move the levers. Let's make decisions about this. We definitely want is important. How are we going to fund it and which fund it's going to come from? So I think I understand I agree with you 100%. The services aren't going away. It's just how we're aggregating them to make sure that we're doing things in the best way. I mean, I think the general assistance piece, how you've merged it with the health department services, people are getting better services. They're getting surround services in a way that I think most in the community couldn't have dreamed that it could be this good. And thank you for your leadership on this, Yvonne. And I mean, I know that you probably hear a lot more than I do about it, but I've not heard negatives overall, that people are getting better services. And I think that's exactly what you're saying around this as well. If we can take the funding and add to the other pieces of funding that we're putting out, mental health, CDBG, even some with economic development. So looking at it in a comprehensive way. So I agree. We need to make sure.
I believe me, I hear that. I'm trying to give you the voice of people who have feelings about it, and so therefore it makes it how it looks and how it feels is two different things.
And maybe as I'm standing here before you, I think we just need to create a human services fund. And the general fund will have to take money from one pocket and put it in another pocket. But if that assures the community that we're doing what we're doing, it's one more page in the budget that's already pretty long anyway. So that's certainly something we can do.
And it's clear. It just makes it a little clearer. I don't know. Maybe not, but it's budget time, so we'll get a chance to talk about it some more.
Yeah. Well, we've got dozens of people in this building working a lot of hours putting together a budget. We would like the hope that makes sense to everyone. So if one more way to make sense is a human services fund, we'll create a human services fund that's funded by the general fund, and we'll attach all of the town fund costs, separate the overhead, separate the assessor. So basically the community purchase services and maybe a handful of other things, and we can create a fund. So I will ask the finance department to do that.
Yeah. A lot of the questions were generated just because we didn't see it. So if we didn't see it, there's a likelihood that the public didn't see it. So anything to spell that out, I can speak for myself, would be appreciated.
You bet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second, all out.